Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded May 12th, 2021, 6:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Good afternoon or good evening, Franklin. How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. The weather can't figure itself out. I'm down here in Coats where I was running shorts the other day.
Well, I mean, I think you have to run to the store because they don't have any gas now down there, right?
Here, don't have any gas, which is so crazy. Can't mention his name. Got a buddy over there that I've been knowing for, golly, I've been knowing him for a while. He's part of their networking team. It is a circus-ish, so whatever going on right now. So hopefully nobody stitches together. Who knows this black dude over here that says he has a buddy over here that's telling them that everything's bad over there, right? Oh my goodness. Which is so crazy.
We'll withhold names to protect the innocent, right?
Which is so crazy. For those our listeners and watchers on Twitch, Colonial Pipelines to be a customer of mine a long time ago, or a client of mine, or whatever, because I did a lot of their Cisco integration, their WAN and router stuff, when that was my thing. And I can't, claim to have an intimate knowledge about what's going on with them, but I'll give them this: they were never cheap at spending money on IT, even back in the day. I remember they were paying the rate. This is 15 years ago. They did not balk at paying you $200 an hour if you was good at what you were doing on the networking side. So I don't know what's going on with it. I try to stay off the news because it's always sensationalized, right? And the news is always, they always make it seem like it's breaking news. Like, dude, it's not breaking news. You 2 days behind.
Well, most of the time I don't trust what the media says. I have people that I watch on Twitter that I trust what they say about the situation. So
yeah, it's if I was a betting man, they're going to pay the ransom.
No, they already said they're not. But yeah, what drives me crazy is that every single time something comes out, they say, "Oh, it was an advanced attack" or whatever. I hear about the attack later on. I'm like, no, that was not advanced. But it sounds like, I don't know what this one was, but other ones I've heard in the past, I'm like, no, a 9-year-old could break into your into your business. So, which, always comes back to the time when I told that friend, I said, I wanted his business. I told him, I said, listen, I know your network. I know everything about your business. And, a 9-year-old could actually break in. He has 20 office locations. I don't know how many hundreds of employees. I said, listen, a 9-year-old could break in and take over your network. So he went back to his network guy. The network guy says, hey, we have a firewall, antivirus. We're just fine. So he told me, Frank, we're just fine. I said, okay, I did my job as a friend to point that out to you, and I left it at that. So the old, we have antivirus and firewall.
It's not, like I said, you heard this. It's not if, it's just when, and it's coming, right? And one of the best things, I was reading Krebs on security, and he just did a write-up about the dark side, the ransomware campaign. If you get a chance, go read it. I know that you're not a big fan of him. I like reading his commentary because he puts a lot of detail in, for what it's worth. It's concise. It's well written. At least it's written by a journalist and not a technologist, right? With bad grammar and stuff. But if you see the very business-like way that this ransomware gang goes about their business, you got to sort of be impressed. It is. Well, it's all
they're
right.
Organized. They're organized.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the video that we were talking about before we started the podcast, where I was showing you the Black Hills video, and one of the things that they really came across about is that, as long as everybody thinks that there's hackers in their basement hacking away or whatever, and their kids or whatever, this is actually a profession. They're very professional about what they do, and they're very organized about what they do. And when you realize that, then don't cheapen what they're doing. They're very professional, and I agree with that.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you out, Jerry.
No.
They work in teams. They take PTO. They have benefits. They even say they pay well. They're recruiting people on their. If you get jump on Tor, jump down and go down to the advertising. They're recruiting, looking for network penetrators, right? And they give a criteria. If you are this person, you can do this. We can make you better. You can work in a team. You don't have to do this yourself. We give very good pay. We pay our bonuses. Say, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. But no, I use my powers for good. Go
Yeah.
ahead. You were saying something?
Well, no, I mean it's. I was just going to affirm what you're saying. I mean, when I was in services on the consulting side, I was doing tactical recovery for our customers, and at the beginning, everybody's like, "Well, what 0-day did they use to pop me?" By the end, I'm showing them LDAP passwords flying in the clear over their network, right? Because of their perceived security, right? They think they're advanced, but like you said, most of the time that's not the case. It's the simple stuff that gets you a lot of times.
Yeah.
So which brings up the thing that Edward called me the other night at like 9 p.m. He said, "Sorry for calling you so late. I died laughing." That's like early for me. That's late for him. And what drives me crazy is how many enterprises do you see implementing Defender for Endpoint and not doing any of the attack surface reduction work, or configurations. Drives me crazy that they're not doing that. Everybody's just listening to the podcast that has Defender for Endpoint put in there. You have to be doing the attack surface reduction. As a matter of fact, you can go out to Learn, go out to the SC200, the Defender for Endpoint learning, the first learning path. There's an entire thing in there about attack surface reduction. You should definitely be doing that.
And if you're not an MDE customer and you're just trying to manage it on Windows and with other tools, look at our guidance on just lateral traversal mitigations, right? We've got policy those as well, which can be adapted to any management tool or other thing too.
I'll give you this. The reason sometimes you see just the MDE and not the other side is because they're two separate things, right? The AV and the deployment of it and the management of it, it looks like to customers, hey, I got to have SCCM, I got to be writing GPOs, I got to use Intune/MEM, Microsoft Endpoint Management, one of those. And that's totally separate from the XDR platform. And so sometimes they forget. And I tell you one thing that they do. Nobody reads the documentation. If you're doing the MD thing, it references you to go do this. It tells you you need to go do these things once you get the enrollment on and then manage these endpoints. And then from there, if you got complexities about the way your environment is stood up, because I had a customer that absolutely, if I had hair, I pulled it out. Well, we can't seem to do this, and that. And I noticed, I looked up at his right-hand corner, I said, hover up over your login. And he was in Defender for Endpoint or Security Center, Microsoft.com or the new unified portal. And I said, okay, I see it. You marked John Doe at acmedev.com or acme.dev. I'm like, okay. Then I look at the machine that we're trying to get stuff done. I said, why does that machine have a different UP and a different suffix? Oh, the machine's in the production domain. Go back to your Azure where I see all this stuff, this Intune or MEM. He said, yeah. I said, so no wonder you can't push anything here. This machine is being managed by Intune in a totally separate subscription versus where you logged in and all you did was onboard it using the onboarding script. I can onboard anything I want, but if I can't push it, and I said, and that's clearly in the documentation that was sent over. Oh, we didn't read that. We just, because we didn't read it. You didn't read it. Okay. Go
Definitely be using the security baselines and on Intune Endpoint Manager. Take a look at the, I forget, they had 3 or 4 out there. The one that's specific for Defender for Endpoint only adds a few more things to the baseline. Just take a look at the difference and then put it back into the baseline from there. And the categories are not named the same, which is kind of annoying to try to deal with. But yeah, if you're not doing that, then you're just not getting your money's worth out of the product too. So
yeah.
So Franklin, other than that, what did you do good this week? How did you make the world a better place?
How did I make
the? There you go.
I'm at a loss, So, how about you?
Well, got downstairs finally done.
And that makes
take
the
it.
world a better place.
It is, because I make the world safer, right? You know, you think it's
Yeah.
easy being Ed and protecting the world? You should wake up in the morning and say, thank you very much. Otherwise, I don't want to hear what you got to say unless you grab a rifle and you storm that hill.
I think you're wearing that jacket not to show all of your cooking accidents.
Thank you for your service, Ed.
I was out running, man, and I swear it had to be a tarantula hawk wasp that stung me on the neck the other day. I mean, it stung me so hard I went down to one knee. And my wife's like, what the hell's on your neck? I'm like, evidence, damn wasp stung me to death. But no, I took that Mac Pro box, took Ubuntu off, finally got a Mac OS ISO that would work. And I'm going to make it back a Mac and I'm going to roll it.
All right. Here's what I did to try to make the Microsoft world a better place.
Oh, here we go.
Back to my Defender for IoT situation. Because I see they're actually pushing out videos about this. So they wanted me to close the case, right? I'm like, well, I'm waiting for the credit cards to verify I don't have to pay you, right? I said, but I'd really like, I'm a fan of Microsoft. I would actually like to get to the root cause of all of this because I don't want it to happen to other people, right? So they said, they gave me a list of stuff. All right, here's what happened. Completely wrong. I'm like, okay, you didn't even go back to read, because the guy that was working my case ended up getting fired, right? And so now they go back and they're completely wrong in thinking about how I should have been billed during that time, to the point that they thought that until I actually deleted the subscription, then the charges would go away. So once again, if you're doing the Azure Defender for IoT trial, don't do it on any subscription that you care about until Microsoft gets this figured out. But I was trying to make the world a better place by getting them to take a look at the root cause so it would not happen to anyone else.
Two things. First of all, you didn't listen to me before you did it. So that's what happens to you. You don't listen to it. Number two. Number two, you got billed like $50,000 for a month or $100,000, but the fact that your credit card has that higher limit, pretty impressive.
Well, it was only like $1,000, but
I know I'm exaggerating. I'm glad you got. I know people that know people.
Hey, if they want to get it figured out, I'd be happy to work with them on it if they want to take a look at my case to figure out the whole deal. But that's what I was pushing for. But when they come back with, not understanding what was going on, I'm like, all right, I'm hanging this up.
Yeah, don't worry. We get it. I gotta show you something. I got some stuff, some Raspberry Pis and a couple of flippers that I'm gonna put in. But you got me scared now because that building got me a little bit nervous. What else? I did that stuff with the IOCs, helping the customer out. I didn't burn myself this week. All the servers downstairs are good. Something else you and I were supposed to talk about. I can't remember.
I don't know, but do you want to introduce our guest?
Oh, he's not a guest. He's a friend. That's different, right? So I'm going to let him introduce himself, but let me give you a little bit of background. Upon my first days in Microsoft, I was a fan of this guy before coming on board, and I got to meet him in person at an internal convention at Ready. And any and all things I've learned about MCAS, learned about PowerShell for MCAS, this was a guy, right? Because nobody seemed to be talking to the lost guy. And I met this guy in one of this breakout session, and he actually made time when everybody else was so busy. And then it just so crazy enough that we ended up working together, and the dude is super sharp, right? Totally approachable, share his knowledge, help everybody out. And I'll still say to this day that this is what you want when you come to a company, somebody that'll say, hey man, you're going about this the wrong way. You got to do it this way. I'll let him introduce himself, what he does, what his passion is.
I was like, what you're saying is you set me up with an MCAS person this week. Is that the deal?
Well, hold on. I'm gonna ask him a question. We're gonna do it. We're gonna change the show up a little bit. Garrett,
Hello.
Of the four products I'm about to name, tell me which is your favorite.
Okay.
No. Which one would you implement first at a customer?
Which one would you implement? Azure Sentinel, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Cloud App Security, or Microsoft Defender for Office 365?
It depends, right? There's so many so many questions I have about the customer, right?
You got to choose one.
Yeah. Well, for me, mostly just not to look like an idiot out of those, I'd pick MCAS because the other ones aren't my strong suits. Some of the identity ones are, like Defender for Identity, right, and the identity focused tools. But yeah, so MCAS would be my choice.
We can go ahead and end the podcast now. There's nothing else to be said.
That's right. I'm kicking them off anyways. What are you talking about?
So, Jared, go ahead and introduce yourself, your passion, what you do, and the floor is yours, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do this. I've never done one of these before, but I think it's a long time coming too that we needed a podcast form of security info delivery. So I like it and appreciate the invite. Thanks for the kind words, Ed. My name is Jared Poeppelman. I've been with Microsoft. I just had my 10-year anniversary on April 18th, actually. So been here 10 years, started in services as a consultant, doing identity and cybersecurity consulting. Then I moved over to the cybersecurity architect role over there, and did that role for a short while before coming to what is effectively this role. I came to a role as a technical specialist on MCAS, and it just got reorged and restructured within Microsoft to different forms, but basically was a security GVB in one name or another that whole time, right? So focusing on cloud and security workloads with our enterprise customers. If I had any claims to fame, I guess it would be my work on the golden ticket attack at Microsoft. When that dropped, I was in services and we were doing strategic recovery for a customer, and the KRB TGT keys was not a set of secrets that we had cycled as part of the recovery. And this was a big enterprise customer and partner, by the way. And they came in with their hair on fire going, "Hey, Microsoft, this new attack just came out. What do we do?" Well, we have to reset KRB TGT. Well, how do we do that? And what is it going to break? And, we didn't have an answer. And so I just did a bunch of legwork, gathered a lot of information, read protocol specs and RFCs, and put together kind of what I thought our guidance should be, and that ended up being our guidance on that attack. And then it was writing the PowerShell script along with it to reset KRB TGT. So if anybody listening to the podcast has reset their KRB TGT keys in their domain or for us, that's me. Although that script is now its own open source project, and there are much more focused people maintaining that now, not me. So, but it's maintained its functionality and usefulness for sure.
So you bring that up. Can I ask you about Defender for Identity? I
Absolutely.
think it's kind of the one product out of the four that I see the least amount of understanding about the product.
Okay.
Or partners trying to implement it, and so on. So could you tell people about that product and why it's so important?
Yeah, and it's relevant to the golden ticket attack, right? Because what Defender Identity is, it's the new name, new branding for what we used to call Azure ATP. And before that, the purely on-prem version that some customers still have was called ATA, or Advanced Threat Analytics. But it's essentially advanced detection for Active Directory domain services on-prem. So for customers that want to secure their Active Directory domains and forests, that's what MDI is going to help them do. Put a sensor on the domain controllers, do deep inspection of especially the Kerberos traffic, right? What we're doing there is we're looking deeply at specifically Kerberos and NTLM authentication traffic to build profiles of what's sort of normal behavior and what's happening. And then we look for risks. Some of it's just anomaly, stuff that's sort of out of normal, where some of it's very deterministic, right? We know what certain attacks look like a pass the hash attack. Or a golden ticket attack, for example.
Yeah. What is a golden ticket attack?
A golden ticket attack is essentially a credential forgery attack. It's even not really an attack as much as a persistence method, because it requires an attacker to pretty much have fully compromised the domain already, because they've either gotten, a unauthorized rogue DC replica of the whole domain, including the passwords, or they've gotten compromised control of a domain controller, gotten domain admin equivalent credentials, or the sort of most backdoor way would be if they got an old backup tape or media that had the ntds.dit file from a domain controller. So even without being online in that domain, if I got that file, what I've got in there is the keys for KRB TGT. What that is, it's the anchor of trust in every domain. So it's essentially the account you could think of, or the key that all the domain controllers share, so that they can all authenticate you for that domain equally, right?
So what's a skeleton key?
A skeleton key is a little bit different. They're both very similar, but a skeleton key is sort of like putting an implant of bits on a domain controller, where I, as the attacker, know that if I provide the right password or key, the domain controller will let me authenticate as whoever I want, because I've got that malicious malware on the domain controller. But golden ticket attack doesn't necessarily mean bits on the domain controller, right? I could be forging golden tickets, throwing them in my client ticket cache, and then using those to authenticate and get tickets to whatever servers files.
Now, what's this Kerber roasting thing?
Kerber roasting, that's a newer one. I'm not deeply familiar with some of the sort of what's the layman terms like that. I think Kerber roasting, there's a couple different attacks that Kerber roasting could be referring to. So I don't know that name and specifically what it's referring to, but one of them's like encryption downgrade attacks, right? So if I'm in the man in the middle between your client and the domain controller it's trying to talk to, one of the things that I can do is I can take your attempts to authenticate and replace some of the information in there to cause the authentication to use older, weaker encryption mechanisms that can then be abused. And so those are encryption downgrade attacks. We have modern functionality like Kerberos armoring is, again, a fancy term. All that really is that we do authenticated errors, right? So if there's a failure on negotiation because of a man in the middle doing something, we're less susceptible to those types of attacks with Kerberos armoring.
Cool.
So I know we're kind of all over the board there, but
no, that's fine. I mean, if you haven't noticed, Franklin's a real big on authentication-based attacks, and really his help. When you think you know something, you probably do, but that doesn't mean you learn it the right way. So,
yeah.
Franklin, within the last month or so, has really gotten me into really understanding the authentication process. When you start saying TGT, TBTs, how the Kerberos authentication process works. People can always give you a high level, but he hit me to a couple of videos, and I watched it, and literally I had to watch it like 3 times. I'm like, okay, it's like me speaking English, but if I start talking quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement, you can understand the words, but you have no idea what that means, right?
Yeah.
And so when I went back and I watched this, it's really cool to do, especially if you can simulate the attacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you got an isolated environment that you're not causing bells and whistles to go off. So that's a really big deal with some of the stuff that he does and things I'm learning. And I really had to get deep because I had a customer that we were doing an MDI project, and it went from being a simple request to ask to huge number of domain controllers that we end up getting out, right? Twice, because I've never seen a customer that had like a staging or a pre-production that's so closely mirrored production that they almost had the same number of domain controllers. Like, this is a little excessive. Like, nope, we do this so we know, right, the scope and breadth of things and what we do, and they put the money into it. And of course, virtualization lowers the cost of everything. But for them to have a staging or pre-production that had these many domain controls and had a process before they move forward, I learned a lot. I learned that proxies break sensors in MDI all the time, right? So we figured that out because they're outbound. They did more filtering of their outbound traffic than they actually did coming in. So they say our philosophy is we want to see what's going out, and they did a huge amount of inspection of what was going out of
Yep.
their environment, right? And I learned a lot doing that because I've set up MDI several times, but I've never set it up with the GSMA account, right? We just sort of
Yep.
atypical account and use that. They had to have that. We checked all boxes, and the customer is actually happy with it. Like we are seeing some stuff, and they didn't tell me how they were going to test it. They used Nessus and Tenable on a reoccurring internal scan. And the minute they started pulling sensitive, guess what caught them? MDI. They started seeing it. LDAP enumeration. People trying to do this. They start seeing the Tenable scans. Like, okay, the thing can't. They said the product does have a few security chops. This is what we're doing automatically. So they had to go exclude those IP addresses, those server names that of that
Yeah.
server that was doing it, right? And it was so crazy that the Tenable/Nexus server, and I don't know how they did this because I thought it was locked down to an IP address and a license and a key to it, that server would pop up on different subnets because they were running virtualized. So that's pretty cool. So
Oh yeah, they're trying from different. If you're always trying from the same source IP, right, you're not really testing firewall rules that well. So yeah, that makes sense.
It was bouncing around. I'm like, why is this
Yeah.
different? You guys have that many Tenebles? Nah, we're just moving around.
You're I agree with you though, right? It sounds like that customer has a high level of operational maturity, right? If they're doing that level of pre-production, pipeline of everything through those pre-production environments, that's great, right? We don't see a lot of customers go to that length of due diligence, but it's great to see.
So the real reason we brought you on is to talk about all the goodness that is Microsoft Cloud App Security, right? So you get to choose, which is my favorite product. That's what. If you haven't listened to the podcast,
I think he's got a topic for us, so we're going to skip this Cloud App Security thing and talk about the topic that Jared brought on.
Well, the first. Can I want to jump in on what I did to make the world a better place, and it ties into this MDI discussion because, and really multiple things we've already been talking about, so it plays in nicely. I'm helping a healthcare customer finish up their MDI deployment actually, and I'd have to go look at the timeline, but in about 2 or 3 months, we've gotten fully deployed from their pre-production forest through their QA and production forests, all 3 forests. We've gotten the sensors deployed. We're talking about hundreds of DCs, hundreds of thousands of users, a very large environment. And this is a big part of the customer's rapid effort to mature their defenses against ransomware, right? So I can't think of much better thing that we can do as security experts than to help protect patient care from ransomware. These days, that's one of the biggest threats. And, it's rare that our profession, delves into life and limb security, right? But it is when it comes to patient care. So, that, and it ties into the topic that I wanted to talk about a little bit today too, which was supply chain security, and specifically around digital supply chain, because, it's, I just see it as like, it's sort of this bigger topic that's behind the ransomware topic, right? And it's behind the Equifax hack, right? And all the way back to, the Target hack and a lot of these hacks, right? It's digital supply chain in one form or another, right? So in the case of healthcare customers, right, they've got IoT devices on their network in the form of medical devices they can't touch, right? Those things are sealed, and the FDA says you better not open those up, right? So we got to rep protections around that, right? But MDI specifically is a big part of it, right? Because no matter how an attacker gets into an environment, they're almost always going to have to use some form of authentication to move around the environment, even when they're living off the land, not using malware, right? And they're using the bits that are already on the machines in the form of PowerShell and all that stuff. It's still the authentication that's sort of like the unavoidable sort of signal they're going to have to send off, to the exhaust they're going to be given off. And so MDI, I think, is sort of a cornerstone of that digital supply chain, because it's sort of wrapping around your domain controllers in your AD, right? So it really doesn't matter the client endpoints, whether they're owned by one of your suppliers, it's one of your own medical devices, one of your own client machines, or a visiting guest B2B client machine, right? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. In this case, MDI is wrapped around AD, right? So that's what we're watching and protecting. And of course, defense in depth always applies, right? Other layers too, but that identity layer, I think, is a big part of that digital supply chain story. And I see this as sort of this topic that's just going to keep coming back up over the next 5 to 10 years with all of our customers in one shape or form. But it ties into MCAS and many other things too.
So is this something where you're going to go ahead and give us a demo and talk about it, or,
Well, I didn't prepare anything. We can certainly show stuff, but what I wanted to talk about, I think to start with, is a little bit of kind of where we're at. Let's talk about the state of supply chain security, right, with the Microsoft stack. And we have work to do is the short answer, right? What we've got a lot of tools, right? We've got tools that and in our security stack, stuff that focuses on identity, endpoints, data, devices, all these things. And we are at time we're moving towards giving customers with all those tools a unified view into their security picture, right? And so, as we prepped for this podcast, you guys were asking me topics, and I was initially thinking M365 Defender portal, right? That's where a lot of stuff's converging, and that's sort of this path, right? We're giving this unified place for security alerts and detections. Where's our unified place for the customer to look at their digital supply chain, right? We don't have that yet. So in Defender, we're stitching together these various planes of signal, right? And giving the customer a picture that, okay, here are the threats and alerts that we're giving you. We're working on the same from the compliance side, right? As you know, Edward, our compliance GBB counterparts that deal with compliance and info protection, there's a lot of progress there in bringing that into sort of a unified state and picture for the customer to help address those needs. But the supply chain picture, from what I can tell, is still scattershot across the stack, right? So I think that's where we have an opportunity to improve and bring it into sort of a unified view. But so let's just kind of go down the list though, right? We talked about MDI already, right? I think another identity plane aspect would have to be Azure AD, and it's not just the identity protection part and those detections of threats, but just the way OAuth apps get registered in Azure AD, right? That's a client app. That's part of your digital supply chain. So what are those client apps doing? What do they have permissions to, right? Are they from you? Are they from Microsoft or some other known publisher? Are they from an unknown publisher, right? That's all part of digital supply chain.
Can I ask this? We understand the word digital. We understand the word supply chain. Individually, they mean something totally different, but help users with a layman definition of digital supply chain. Help our listeners understand that.
That's a perfect question. I'm glad you asked that, because it kind of highlights how we've got pieces of it spread all over, right? So one could argue part of your digital supply chain is what SaaS apps are my users using, maybe in some cases that I don't know about. And we know that MCAS does shadow IT discovery, right, to help identify that. But that's a small part of it, right? That's certainly not all of the digital supply chain. GitHub Enterprise customers, right? So if you're using GitHub Enterprise to do line of business, developing your own apps in-house as a business, you've got your own repos that you want to look for security in, right? Are there any secrets or passwords or keys getting placed in the code, right? We need to detect that right away and mitigate it. What about, hey, my code is relying on these other libraries like Apache Struts or something else that could have a vulnerability in it. How do we map those dependencies? That's part of your digital supply chain, right? Mm-hmm. The libraries you're using to develop on. You've also got supply chain for your devices. How do you know your device wasn't implanted with a spying chip, right, from an opposing nation state? Was it built? What country was it built in, right? Even goes to that. So the only way we have help customers address that is we can be your single source, right? If you want to buy devices from us, we can be your source for that, right? It's with Surface devices and such. So it's kind of digital supply chain is many things, right? I guess is the answer.
What could have been different about SolarWinds?
Well, frame the question a little bit better. What do you mean different?
Yeah. Well, so let me use an example of Equifax, right? Maybe because that one's just one I'm a little bit more familiar with. So they had apps exposed to the internet, right? They thought they had done their due diligence and probably, could have very well had external code reviews and all that, but they were using Apache struts as a library, right? That they were using, and what they didn't have visibility into is they were using that library as an underpinning for their application. That library was out of date. The version they had a security vulnerability. They didn't have the visibility into that vulnerability, nor did they have the visibility into the lack of their libraries being up to date, right? Both being a problem, right? One sort of preventative, the other's a detective, right? Control. But
so it sounds like digital supply chain is just a techno for saying technology integrations, right?
and where they come, where's the source of it come from, right? Specifically.
Yeah. Because if someone, God forbid, in the thoughts and comments and speculation doesn't represent my employer, what I think that happen if it happens in the future.
Yeah.
Think about what happened if someone was able to infiltrate something like ServiceNow.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about how many people that use that as part of their ticketing system, orchestration, and a bunch of other things. So the digital supply chain is the services that are integrated into your primary line of business technology, use sources, right?
Yeah.
Some people have very small, some people have very large. The cloud looks like it's making it larger because it's easier.
Yep.
I don't think that if you took digital supply chain and ran it back about 12 years, you probably wouldn't have it because the inadequacies are on premise and how hard it was to get something to work on premise because everything had to go through the firewall, go through the proxy, go through this. It made integrations hard. So people said, well, we're not going to integrate, which led to them not updating their internal applications and such for the integration or moving forward with modernization of their apps. But just being cloud now has made people more receptive of saying, okay, it's time to either switch this application or ask the vendor to modernize it, or we modernize it ourselves. So I think that really makes a good sense of what digital, your digital supply chain means. So now users and watchers know digital supply chain is somewhat synonymous with the integrations with other applications you need to run your business. Or what I'm also seeing is that within this digital supply chain, and I don't know if it's prevalent now, but I suspect now, given enough time, we're going to attack the security tools, right? What better way to get into an environment by integrating or infiltrating or hiding in a tool that supposedly is there to protect you? I've had some fanciful ideas on how you would do that. With SolarWinds, it looks and sometimes it sounds and can even smell like a security company, but SolarWinds is not that. They're a management company. They have some personalities around security, right? And I think it's public knowledge. Wasn't there a WinWire? Then they announced that they were going all E5, all Microsoft security, right? So hindsight is 2020, right?
Yeah.
But we'll see what's going on. But you can only do better when you know better.
Yeah, I mean, I started my IT consulting career right in the midst of the Y2K remediation, if you guys remember that. And back then, supply chain was just hardware and software inventory. Where were you buying your hardware from? Where were you buying your software from? It's more complex than that now. Yeah, it's the same layers of security, right? It's apps, identity, data, devices, and infrastructure, which is network and servers. And you got to look at what's the source supply chain for every piece of all that, right?
And a good point, when we move on to the next topic, before it was called digital supply chain, you would just call it IT supply chain. Look what happened with Spectre and Meltdown, right?
Mhm.
That it affected premise, cloud, whatever, because the vulnerability was in the something that was ubiquitous to computing. It is a chip. Everybody using the chip, right? Certain organizations have been hip to this for years, right? They can only source from certain individuals. They can control the supply chain, so there was no
Mhm.
embedded malware. You didn't worry if you bought a laptop that laptop came embedded with stuff. I would say that if you bought any laptop today, they've been implanting malware for years. All these games and
Yeah.
cyber
Bad
something.
fish
Yeah.
on Lenovo. Bad fish on Lenovo laptops, or Superfish it was called. Sorry,
Yeah. So they've been putting this
Superfish was on
crap on
Lenovo
laptops.
laptops.
You know, I knew that this hit ahead years ago when people will allow you to order devices blank. There was nothing on them, right? You're responsible for the license and all this other stuff, which is sort of a precursor to autopilot, right? Just send me a machine bare metal, and if I can boot to the
Mhm.
UFIE or whatever, UMEI or just to the BIOS, let me send it down. Don't put anything on here, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but nobody makes a move until it hurts,
Yeah.
right?
Well, we have the Microsoft managed desktop. I don't know if as an offering, right? Meaning customer pays one set per user per month for a device as well as the M365, E5 license, I believe. So it's kind of all encompassing, right? So you're essentially sourcing your device and your productivity stack all from Microsoft, right? In one purchase, right? So it simplifies the supply chain. But I think longer term, we're going to see some newer technologies applied to these problems too. So there's already talk a lot about the new blockchain technology being applied to supply chain, right? To keep track of every component and source, right? I think of Spectre Meltdown you referred to. How nice would it have been if the right after it was discovered, the processor manufacturers could have flagged something on the blockchain, which automatically knew every processor that was manufactured ever with that vulnerability, and everyone could publicly evaluate their supply chain against that and act accordingly, right? That kind of capability, I think, is stuff that we'll see in the future to help address this problem, because, with cloud computing, it's just becoming more and more collaborative, more and more cross-org, and these supply chains are really just webs, right? They just go everywhere. You
Well,
mentioned ServiceNow earlier. I was thinking, it made me think, if a customer's orchestrating their security response in ServiceNow and ServiceNow gets compromised, so the attacker can now disrupt your response, right?
So
Think of that one.
So what happens is security teams are supposed to be working out of band. In reality, the service team, the security team, my fault, should actually have their own M365 implementation, everything that's actually out of band from everything else. Because there has been situations where the security teams, been one of their credentials have been compromised and so on. So you should definitely keep them. Have a different M365 implementation for them to help deal with that.
Even if they don't use it in their day-to-day job, and it's only been it's a warm site, it should be treated as though it's a war room. It's somewhere that you can go that is sanitized to allow you to do your business, right? I've seen some organizations do this way before the cloud, that they had that separate environment that they could pivot to, and it was, most of the time you only associate this with government agencies, right? Everything from air gapping, separate domains, separate logins, the smart cards and stuff like that. But now you're starting to see other organizations say, hey, we need a totally separate domain from where we do our line of business, from where we do our security monitoring and such, because if we got insider threat, they can see that, right? And that makes sense. That's a lot of work though. Relatively speaking, for someone who says security is not my thing, and you telling me to get a totally different three. I think the effort is more prohibitive than a cost, because to go spin up an environment, your security team is not going to be large. Even if you got money, you're paying good people. You got hunters, responders, administrators. Let's say that a mid-sized company has 25 people. That's still not expensive. 25 people on the EVI subscription. You can stand all this stuff up, put all your security tools in it, lighthouse it to the production or dev. That's not daunting to a customer. I think they will absorb the cost and say, this is the cost of doing business. What happens is that's work. And I think a lot of people are like, I got enough stuff going on. And just think about companies that don't have a dedicated, to this day, there's still companies that are really large that do not have a dedicated security team. It's someone that does security. And I want to pivot a little bit about, let's talk about what's prevalent in the news right now that everybody's hackles up. Let's talk about Colonial Pipeline a little bit. Hypothetically, and I don't know what they're running internal. Like I said, my boys over there, they won't say anything. I mean, on the threat of pain, you better not say anything.
We probably have people in there helping too.
Probably.
We're never going to find out.
We're never going to find out. And I think they're not really being cooperative with the Department of Homeland Security. This is just, like I say, I'm just seeing it sensationalized on TV, and I haven't really got down into the Twitters and the people I follow like Frank. But based on the type of ransomware, and this is not the first time, this is just a variant of it, which of the products would have probably given them the best chance to resist? If they had been running MDE with the configuration that Frank's talking about, ASR being pushed down, or the baseline security configuration, just check the box and send it down. You slide the things over, right? MCAS definitely has a ransomware policy built in. You can see it, right? I don't know about Microsoft Defender for Office 365 because we don't know what the insertion point was. We can assume it's mail, but we don't know that that's how I got in there. And I don't know if MDI would have been affected. But do you think MCAS would have gave these guys the ability to cut off an arm to save the body because they would have saw this type of activity going on? Or would
I
MDE
think I
have
would
been
want. Yeah, I think I'd probably want MDE.
Mm-hmm.
But I also always think back to WannaCry. You know what I mean? And I had a very big customer that got hit hard with that, and they wanted to blame us or Microsoft a lot, right? And I get that, right? It's a tough time and it's an emotional time, but the reality was, if they would have just been running up to date Windows and up to date Defs, they wouldn't have even gotten hit with, right? So it's almost the simpler things, right, in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think if I had to pick one, it'd probably be MDE for ransomware.
All right, I like you
understand
again. I like
and
I know the limitations of the MCAS detection too. There's only a certain visibility signal it gets on ransomware that MDE's got better signal for, I think.
I can almost tell you we set a record here, and I'm going to break the record because it can be broken a little bit later. We're 52 minutes in, and Azure Sentinel hasn't come up. You want to talk about it, right? So that's pretty good, right? I am still a huge fan of the Arcadis solution, but I'm a bigger fan of MDE now, right? The hunting capabilities. If you'll go ahead and put some effort into it, there are a few things that are shortcoming. Franklin will tell you one, that he loves Sysmon. He doesn't think that MDE sends enough relevant information for true hunters to act on that is vanilla, and they should be more like Sysmon. The problem with that is, if you dump a Sysmon into a log analytics workspace to query against, you better have some paper, right? Your money better be
Not
long.
gonna be cheap. There's a lot of detail in there.
You better have long money like Uncle Phil, because it'll get you, right. But if you do it, especially if you put the AMA agent on and split the alerts versus just traffic, these are architectural things that can overcome the price reservations, right? People are just dumping it all in there. And then when I have this conversation with customers, like, why are you putting these logs in here? Well, we always have. Why? Well, because we have to. Why? Why not split this off and make the operation team pick up some of this cost, and you send the things that are relevant over alerts and incidents, and you can split the actual traffic off, right? Because if you look at like Palo Alto, 90% of their fee is just traffic noise, right? This is what's going on, right? Port here, port there, port breakdown, this, and that. The alerts are very small amount and you can pivot that into a dedicated log analytics workspace for Sentinel, and then you can just split the traffic off into ADX as your data explorer, right? And then you can always do a cross query. You can, Jeff Chen at Microsoft gave me the lowdown on how to actually do that in a live demo. It's actually pretty cool how easy it was to query the ADX workspace, right? And the customer like, oh, we thought we had to go thaw the data out, rehydrate it, bring it all back in. I said, no, you don't have to do that. Let me get somebody who knows how to really do this. And shout out to Jeff Chen at Microsoft coming to the rescue. Really, really, really good at that.
All right, so let's go back to something that Jared said. So how many people do you see in Defender for Endpoint utilizing the TVM feature?
Well, the reality is I'm not engaging with customers that much on MDE because that's not my wheelhouse. What I sort of skim across it with my MCAS, MDI integrations and work around identity and stuff, but I don't focus specifically on MDE. That being said, yeah, I don't think I really have any insight into the threat and vuln aspects of it.
You didn't ask me.
I mean,
I think Ed's the one I would ask probably.
All right,
on that, honestly.
all right, Edward.
Not enough. Not enough is the answer. Right? They're not
enough. What?
People are taking advantage of it, of the TVM. I believe that's the question that you asked, right? How many people?
Yeah, so I mean, that would, they would have known OS stuff, some installed applications for vulnerabilities that are known, and so on. Going back to what Jared said, hey, if they'd only actually been using the latest version of Windows and so on.
Well, the problem with that is you got that you're straddling the line, because when you're talking about AV and you're talking about TVM and you're talking about the OS, you think that's security, but it's really management and administration and logistics, because sometimes those people are the system center guys. And they're like, people think that I'll split a hair with you real quick. Some people think that MFA is related to security. I would say it's not. I mean, it's authentication.
So let's take a look at SC200. Okay, basically in SC200, the TVM versus and also ASR was, you're a SOC analyst. You have input about what is going on here. So you should be, from an ASR standpoint, you should be consulting the Intune team on what the configuration should be. And from the TVM standpoint, obviously putting feedback there, but also know what vulnerabilities are on the machine might also help you deal with a response situation. So even in the SC200, we don't say that you're responsible for it, but we're saying that you're working with the teams that are involved with that, and you should have input about the ASR side, and also how things are configured. And so that is how SC200 approaches it.
Shameless plug, if you don't know Jared, Frank wrote the course.
Okay.
For the SC200. So if you go out and look at the credits, he wrote all the material.
Well, Ed, our teammate Natalie's been talking lately on some of our internal calls about racing models, and this certainly applies here, right? A responsibility model is like, yeah, it might be on the management team as responsible or authorized to make the change, but like Frank was saying, the security folks are consulted on what those configs should be, right?
Well, what you have to do is go ahead and say that IT is not cybersecurity, right? Some people will say, well, I mean, IT cybersecurity, that's like, it's not the same. And I know every company is not going to be able to afford a separate and distinct security group whose focus is to secure the IT resources and workloads. That is going back to a highly opinionated philosophy that I had, is that the CISO should never report to the CIO, ever. They should be equals, because the CISO is going to be controlled by people above him, bean counters, right? I think that when you have a director of security or a chief information security officer or a chief security officer that reports to your chief information officer, that you have hamstringed that person. That person should be equal in the boardroom, because, and their separate budget and their own HR hiring. When you do that, you would think that the overall security and well-being of a company's digital assets is primary of that individual. And this is just my opinion. There are some CIOs that are really good because they've held both roles in their real security mindset. But I would hazard an unscientific survey and guess that the CIOs don't get it. And when they do get really good information and advisoryship from security-minded people, they weigh it against things that have nothing to do with the security of the organization. The first thing they go look at, well, how much is it gonna cost? Does it make me money? Does it sell me money? Does it make the business go faster? Because I got to report to somebody else who doesn't care two beans about this. But you do need to be able to have that RACI model so that those concentric circles, or if you can't be directly, have a liaison. Big companies have this, where when you get ready to make an implementation, you see these principal architects from enterprise networking, from enterprise applications, from enterprise security, all come together. And they go, what are we doing here? Right. All right. So we can go with this. We can go with this. Smaller companies, SMB, SMC, God bless them, they're so tired from the fight to get the budget just to get something that they don't want to fight anything else. Like, sure, whatever you guys say, right? We'll do what you say.
All right, Jared, I got a question for you that you won't
Okay.
have the answer to. Why is TVM not in Intune versus Security Center?
Ask the question one more time. You caught me flat-footed too.
Why wouldn't you put TVM in Intune? Drives me crazy.
Instead of where?
Or put it in both places for all I care.
Because there's this thing called E5 that we want to sell, and Intune's in E3. So.
And once again, who wants to own that?
I think it's just, I mean, it's come probably as a life cycle maturity of our cloud capabilities, right? As Intune and our capabilities evolved, right? We made some stuff E5 and all that, but actually, no, I guess your point is right. We've got it in SCCM too, right? Yeah.
You can only get it it's in E3, right?
Intune and so MEM is Microsoft Endpoint Management, right? Which is really just SCCM and Intune together and rebranded as one, right?
Yeah.
And so, but there is still not parity on what you can do between SCCM administration of and management of clients with Intune. I don't know what those differences are, but I know we're not parity yet.
It's not, because you can go in. That's why you have co-manage, right?
Yeah.
And what I've seen people do is they continue to manage server class workloads with SCCM, and then they do Intune. Yeah.
Endpoint Manager should have TVM in it.
I agree with you. It should.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It should have it in there, but who is it? IT management support?
It should also have baselines in there out of the box, security baselines, in my opinion too. I don't think those are even in MEM though, are they?
I thought they were.
Are they
I'm
now?
always in E5, so I can't remember the.
I'm not up to speed on that. I haven't done that stuff for a long time.
What I'm seeing, what I'm seeing, which is disturbing, that I thought we had turned the corner about 10 years ago, was to turn a lot of these baselines on by default. But the minimal disruption to someone's deployment, adoption of something, made vendors quickly pull back and say, you costing us opportunities and sales. But if a lot of this stuff more came out of the box already there, and you make the customer understand that this is a nuance of out of the box, more secure out of the box, not completely. But I understand companies are in the business to make money. All companies, they can say what they want to say with their mission statement. Yeah. Their job is to make money. And if you happen to get secure at the same time, then God bless you. But if you're not, we're selling this, and we're going to cover our ass by giving you the docs and say, these are best practices or these are best use cases. The reason hackers are doing what they're doing because it's profitable. Mm-hmm. It's just shit's profitable. I mean, these folks are, I don't know how much they're asking Colonial, but I read an article where they asked the last people of high profile for 30 million. If they didn't reply within 3 days, 60 million, same company, same cyber group. And I think I read on President Security that they had the entire negotiation chain in that link. We may put it in the show notes, that the customer ended up selling now for like $12.5 million. Right? That's still not nothing to sleaze that. You asked for 30, you're threatened with 60, the victim made an offer of 275 and you counted with 12 million and you got it. So why would I quit?
Yeah, we don't steal identities anymore. We go straight to just blackmailing you for money, right? It's straight to mission, straight to making money. If that's their motivation, which with the organized crime actors definitely is, nation state actors maybe because they use it as cover, right, to appear that they're not nation state actors too. But
Yeah.
um,
But we
Yeah.
could have these discussions till we're blue in the face. I think that, and I'll make a metaphor that may not be 100%. So our listeners, don't shoot the messengers. It's just my humble opinion. When you have the war on drugs, we try punishing the proprietors of smuggling the drugs in and selling the drugs. That's not a deterrent because there's money to be made. So when you arrest one of these folks, someone steps in and take their place.
As long as the demand's there, right?
As long as there's
Supply
demand
gets
there.
filled. Right?
So you got to make it hurt for these companies. You can't allow these companies to offer you LifeLock, identity protection, or there's no repercussions. So when you tell companies that you show 100% diligence as you did all that you could to prevent this, because you can't stop somebody who has motivation, time, and skill and money. I'm gonna get you, right? But when these C-suites and these owners and everything don't feel the pain, then these other companies go, sucks to be them, but we're still not going to invest any money. The only way you do that is you make it hurt. You got to make it hurt. You got to hurt the shareholders. You got to affect these CIOs, CEOs, bonuses, CFOs, bonuses. You got to make it hurt. Then you would get more investment into people, processes, and then tech. People, processes, and tech. I would say processes first because you can interchange people if you can find the skill set. And product last. Products are products. MDE, Carbon Black, FireEye, CrowdStrike, whatever. Use something.
Right. This is a topic for another show, but I halfway disagree with you.
All right.
Because basically, when you look at taking a company from not doing anything to meeting some of the government mandated requirements. First of all, some of the government mandated requirements are impossible. Nobody even meets them, right? From there, and plus, this isn't something that can be fixed overnight, right? So they're not, when these companies are being fined, they're not looking at where were you at 1 year, 2 years ago to where you're at today in dealing with cybersecurity. They're like, okay, this window was left open out of wherever, and now you're going to be paying all these fines, right?
I didn't say government. Not once did I say government should be the controlling regulatory body.
So I'm saying that when you take a look at the maturing of an organization, when it comes to deciding the financial penalty that they face should be very important. Unfortunately, for a lot of companies, some of the regulations that have been put out are basically it's out of reach, and so they're just like, forget it.
Well,
they're not going to bother.
You and I talked about this. We don't have to have a separate podcast. This is I didn't mean a draconic approach to it. Here's what I meant. One industry that sort of got it right? Cybersecurity insurance. To get underwritten requires that you go through a whole bunch of validation steps. And when I tell you, when you try to file a claim, because I've been part of this, they've tried to find anything not to pay you. Anything that you violated, right? So sometimes the industry will cause regulation. And will call, not regulation, that's too strong, will cause adherence to it, right? When you realize if you didn't do everything you do it and you don't pay all this money into a premium, and now they won't recognize your claim because you did something dumb. Something as simple as you didn't conduct your annual end-user phishing thing.
I agree, and there's a lot of times I've been in a situation where people wanted me to provide best practices, and I refused to do it. I let Microsoft go ahead and do that right now because I don't want to be held responsible. The next thing is this. Here's the big question, okay? When will a cyber insurance company say, let me see your secure score against other people in your industry.
I don't think that ever happened. Secure
Why?
score, well, because it's subjective in gamesmanship.
Well, there's other evaluation scores like this that are already being used for underwriting from other organizations, right? So there is I forget the name of it off the top of my head. I know there is one company that was doing analytics on like your domain names and IP spaces and all kinds of other information sources that they can gather, and based on that, give you a certain score, which has a direct impact on your cyber insurance.
Right, but so let's say you have a breach, right?
Yep.
And they come and they say, hey, let's take a look at your secure score. And then they use that as, hey, look, you're not really paying attention in this area.
Well, you can't do that because secure score, if you're talking about it, is Microsoft centric. You'd have to have a what's
But
the
if
word
they
I'm looking
have,
for?
because you can use your secure score against other companies your size, your industry, and Microsoft has that data. So what happens if you're in the lowest category out of everyone?
What if I don't use Microsoft?
What's that?
What if I don't use Microsoft technologies?
No, but the point is this: you're saying that they're looking for a reason not to pay on a breach.
Yeah, and so if I had to go with some type of level set or watermark, I would choose a regulation such as CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, because it's a combination of DFARS and NIST, and trying to get 100% on NIST 800-171 or dash 53 is daunting. The CMMC makes it more consumable because it took into account DoD, which is ultimately going to go down to agencies, and it also took into account the attack chain supplies of these smallers. So I would go with an autonomous entity rather than secure score. I agree with what you're saying. That makes sense to be able to compare yourself against other people who may be in your vertical, your size, your capability.
And can that be used against you on a cyber insurance company if you're not in the top?
I think what you're saying is like, would it be considered negligence, right? Because you got all these alerts, and but there are points that Edward has. Is like some of it's just signal we don't have, right? It's like, well, if you're doing Okta as your IDP and you're doing MFA there, yeah, we don't see you as having MFA turned on, maybe, or whatever, because of technology use. But where I think an opportunity for the industry is emerging of sort of a cyber insurance and an MSSP model, right? So if I'm your MSSP in here operating it, and I'm also sort of interested in keeping the best secure score possible for you, because there's also some insurance level associated with the services I'm providing you too. So my underwriting there, I see that as a potential way to kind of tie it together and help MSSPs really help customers drive some of that, where it could become relevant. But yeah, I haven't seen any of our secure scores applied specifically to any insurance scenarios.
And in the famous words of Bear Bryant, Coach Demetrius over at Alabama, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I'll game the system. I can go into the secure score and say that's not relevant because I have another product in there. I'll game the system.
Yeah.
If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Some of it's self-attested. Yeah,
it's self-attested, right?
But, yeah.
I'm just saying that's one of the things about.
But a lot of compliance has a lot of self-attestations though. So that's kind of par for the course.
And insurance companies don't have the time when they're trying to get you underwritten and get that monthly or annual premium going. Because if I was a cybersecurity company, insurance company, I would come on with my own assessors and have my own framework to say, if you want us to underwrite you, here's what we use as a model. You can call it the Jared Poeppelman.
They do this.
Yeah, they do.
I've worked in the industry. They do. They find what they believe are the valid signals for correlating against your likelihood of compromise. I mean, that's really what their actuarials do with cyber insurance too. So I honestly don't know exactly what they use to do that. But I've never heard of secure score being part of anything like that. I have, like I said, heard of this other service that does it. So maybe that's something insurance companies use a lot.
And Frank would just use a secure score as a placeholder, right?
Yeah.
Something like that, to be anything, to be able to do that and say, hey, this is that, because,
there's other lawsuits and other agencies that you have to be concerned of that make everything about whether or not you're guilty or not very gray, and they do that on purpose while they're creating case law. So what I saw in the past about cybersecurity and um, government lawsuits against companies is the same exact thing that I'm seeing right now in the crypto markets. So I don't think people understand how those games are actually played out there. So
They don't.
that's the thing that you take a look at the Sony breach. They're like, hey, I paid millions of dollars in fines, or else I could have paid even more in security products. So they
Lesser
chose
two
to pay the
evils, right?
fines.
The
Right.
lesser two evils. I mean, would you rather
Well,
exercise or would you rather take a pill to lose weight?
mhm.
There you go. I'm gonna choose the route of least resistance, least cost, least liability. Sometimes, right? Sometimes, hell, I we've seen this, Franklin, and Jerry, you've seen people buy the most expensive tools. And they sit on the shelf because they buy the tool before they buy the skill, right?
Yeah.
Now they're out scrambling trying to find someone like the three of us
Oh,
to come in here, and
oh,
quite frankly,
delivered ESAEs, our Red Forest when I was in MCS. That was the king solution of that, right? It was, it took a little too much operational maturity for the bulk of our customers. There was only a few that I saw that I thought were actually able to handle it operationally.
so I don't wish anything across any industry that would affect people's livelihood and ability for people to operate and not be exploited. Sometimes these breaches are necessary.
Yeah.
I've learned more from pain than I ever learned from succeeding. So you know, but with that, you need to have companies. I've been personally involved with one company that got the shit ransomware out of them, and then it happened twice, and then the person finally put his hand down, went to the powers that be, local company here in Atlanta, and said, "This can't happen again. Either do this, allow me to do this, or I quit. I'll go somewhere else." When I tell you they're rock solid now, right? And luckily, why their security chops in awareness wasn't up, their operational chops were high. I mean, they had a backup of a backup on premise and off. They were able to restore and get their stuff and not lose more than about 24 hours. But that's 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then it happened twice. And that's when the CIO slash CISO, he was both. He put his hand down and said, we gotta do this. When I tell you they're rock solid, and when I used to go out and work with partners and do these things, I would bring them on and say, tell us about your experience, right? Within reason. And so there is no answer, but sometimes the breaches are necessary. Now, I
Yeah.
wish the best for that company. I hope they recover. I hope they don't. They say they're not going to pay the ransom.
Those breaches happening have a tendency to crystallize the will of the organization to strengthen themselves against these things. But sometimes it, as you said, it takes more than one.
It takes
It's a shame that it does, but it does.
and at least it allows a conversation in some of the big companies. If not
Yeah.
companies, but we at least in that vertical. I hope the rest of the industry and oil vertical are paying attention to this.
Yeah.
You next.
That first bad breach, sometimes the customers resulting actions, long term will, for security strategy, will still be to dawdle and mess around and not get something done, right, with will and
Mm-hmm.
purpose, whatever that is, right? Get something done, right? And then it's sometimes that second breach when it's like, okay, that first one hit, and then we sat around here jaw jacking and talking, and we argued about it, but didn't get anything done and didn't get anything stronger. It really just takes, something to crystallize that will, right? Sometimes it's a person standing up and saying, hey, I know how to address this threat. Give me the authority to do so,
Yeah.
or it's a
But
vendor or something.
the threat actors out there, they'll actually pick a vertical and go after them, because
Mm-hmm.
if they see success here, they're going to then go after that vertical. So
Mm-hmm.
they're very vertical oriented, just like when
Yeah.
they're heavy local and state ransomware situations going on, because they felt that they had the money to pay. from there. So, they definitely go after the verticals. So, I mean, if they're like, hey, we're waiting for the second one, oh, there will be a second one, just because of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And they're not going out to education because education is taking a hit right now. Higher ed, nobody's going back to school. Tuition is down. Leave them alone. Healthcare is struggling. They're strapped on budget because everything's trying to fight COVID, right? Industry like energy is doing well. Everybody's sitting at home burning electricity, burning fossil fuels. Let's go after these guys, right? I think that I will agree with you, and we'll close the podcast out unless there's any other thing. I agree with you that a knee-jerk reaction is better than no reaction. At least someone who wasn't being listened to would get a small window to have their voice heard, at least for a little while. See, I told you this is going to happen. Now, whether the powers that be take heed in partial or full, who knows? This is according to how the message is delivered, right? I think we're beyond fear mongering and insecurity. There is no more fear mongering. Everybody knows the realization of what's going to happen to you, right? Shit, Frank will tell you I was nervous in my home lab. I called him and said, yo, I think somebody's in my lab, man. Someone's trying to do a PowerShell backdoor, and I downloaded Security Onion. And inside the ISO, there were some samples in there, and MDE was catching it every time it scanned that repository. I said, yo, somebody's in my shit. Frank, dude, come help me out. And he's like, go check the hash. And I thought, oh, yeah. So I checked the hash, and that's what it was, right? And inside the ISO, they had a directory with some samples in there.
Yeah, sample exploits.
I was like, the first thing I blamed was my wife. Like, what did she do? Right? I was about to tell her to bring her laptop, her keys, her ass is out of here. Right. But no, it ended up being that. So I did check the hash, Frank, and the ISO had those sample exploits.
You learn how to do exclude directories in Defender. So, so all right. One final question for Jared. Did I convert you from the MCAS in the beginning to Defender for Endpoint now, or is that your number one choice? Or
it's defense in depth, man. My favorite is both.
There you go. Because we got a lot of PG people listening on this call. You might get some nasty calls for folks coming over, right? Like, is that right? And then we had an MCAS PG call today, right? Was that the call? I think it was. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't make that one.
It was actually pretty good. You go back and listen. I was looking for you. That's why I was pinging you. Say, hey, you gonna make the podcast tonight? So hey,
but I'm dealing with this with a customer right now where we're looking at MCAS with MDE integration and doing a big POC right now. So I'm dealing with it, but I'm more on the MCAS side.
So thanks for coming on to the show. You're a guest of the show, man, friend of the show, always welcome. You're going to receive an invite. Franklin wants to play this game called Breaches and Backdoors. So imagine incident response in a Dungeons and Dragons type of scenario, right? So
don't look up the game. It's
don't look up the game.
It's better for you not to be aware of it and just go ahead and play.
So, I'll just absorb the experience as it hits me.
Exactly.
So let me give you a rundown of people that have been on the show. Hold on, let me get to my list right here. So these are the people that we're gonna invite to come play. We're gonna invite.
So is this like a thing? If I fail, like I lose my cybersecurity expert creds or something?
You lose your life. we take it to the extreme here. There is no unless there's some pain, there's no gain. Yeah. So hold on, let me read out.
Last time that I got hit with an internal phishing campaign when Microsoft did a simulated phishing, I'm like, boy, I better have detected this one. If I would have got, baited into clicking on this, I'd really deserved it. But I reported it immediately.
Yeah. So here are past guests to the show.
Okay.
They've been on that we're going to invite to come play. Matt Egan, Matthew Lowe, Rod Trent, Nathan Swift, Kristen Beam, Brody Cassell, Christopher Munez, TJ Besnick, Nanad Doshi, Jen Knock, Matt Solzman, Shidhia Andy, Lily Dullivan, and Jared Poppman. Who's that Jared Poppman? How did he make the list? Oh, but anyway, I'll be sending out invites. We're going to get on and play Breaches and Backdoors, and don't go research it to the guys that'll listen. Brody.
Honest. Scout's honor.
I know Brody will. And Rod Trent will too. Right? Can't trust those guys. I shouldn't have even put their name out there. Right? But we're going to get everybody. We're going to have fun. Got to bring a red cup.
Okay. Red
cup security, baby. I do my best work with a few red cups.
With the red cup.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
been knowing you for 5+ years, man. You've always been that guy that goes above and beyond. I do have one last request, man. We're going to get these PowerShell modules updated for MCAS.
My to-do list gets long.
Yeah, to do this, let it get long.
It grows more than it shrinks.
I
But
know,
yes, I've recruited some help on that effort to try to refactor the MCAS module. We got to make some changes and get V4 done. Kunal is willing to help me. So
I'm just
our
saying-
teammate.
Maybe we have to in our Discord server actually put the to-do list for Jared and start adding that stuff.
Oh no, I already got.
my
I don't
to-do
need
list
any
would
more of
crash in
those.
the Discord server. It would crash it to death,
Yeah.
right? It's like, this is not a list. This is the Dead Sea Scrolls, man. This is how much I got to get done. Sir, I really appreciate you taking time out. Time is more valuable than anything else. I think you get old enough, you'll realize that. So taking time out to come on, I think our listeners enjoyed it. Anytime you want to come onto the show and talk about anything you think is cool, interesting, or you just want to shoot the ish and join and listen to us, this is a show of highly opinionated facts.
Yeah.
And Franklin, did you get some Chick-fil-A French fries today?
I sure did.
I know. I'm watching you. I've got into your camera and I'm watching you eat French fries. So yeah.
The dogs are happy about it.
Inside Joe Jared. So, all right. Well, everyone have a great rest of their evening.
I'm a Chick-fil-A fan. I'm always disappointed when I don't get there in time for my morning Chick-fil-A biscuit.
Oh yeah, Chick-fil-A's good stuff, man. Yeah, and here's the secret again: fresh French fries. Tell them to make them with no salt, so they have to go fry them.
Yeah, go
and then when they
some
give them to you,
And I say, I always have them do it well done, but now they don't do that anymore. So
then I put the salt on them after they cook them fresh. So, all right. Well, everybody have a great rest of the evening, and until the next time.
You too. Nice. I enjoyed it. It was a good time. I'd love to join again.
Right.
Invite me back anytime.
Oh yeah, for
That's
sure.
great.
You're gonna get an invite. Breaches and back doors.
I'm in.